Well, welcome to Emotional Resilience, Living with the Fruit of the Spirit, and I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight. I'm excited about tonight's lesson. We're going to be talking about post-traumatic growth. We're continuing our series on emotional resilience and how our emotions, how we're made up emotionally, and how do we regulate our emotions, how do we recognize them, and then eventually relearn. And the reason I'm picking this topic tonight is because post-traumatic stress is similar to what many of us face. We may not have had a severe trauma, but we're reacting in the present to something that happened in the past. And we're being triggered now because of something that's reminding us of danger from the past, something in the past, and we're reacting in the present. So there's a lot of similarities. And so I thought that what interested me was the term growth. It's a newer term in the field, and I think it's a hopeful term. And that's why I like it, because here's the thing, we have hope today. And we're going to talk about growth and maturity. We don't have to be a victim of our past. Our past doesn't have to define us. It certainly has influenced us, but there's things that we can do to be the best that we can possibly be. So let's just give this time to God and ask Him to speak to our hearts and open our eyes to see new things. So Father, I thank You for bringing us here. I pray that You would speak to our hearts. Lord, give us hope today. Give us, Lord, the sense of the possibilities of how You want us to mature and Father, have this growth. And so, Father, just teach us, I pray, and we'll thank You in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, hopefully you have your notes. If not, you can email me, ron@empowerministry.org. That's ron@empowerministry.org, and just put notes. Better yet, you could say, put me on the mailing list, and then you'll get the notes ahead of time. Those of you that are on the email list, get the notes now, and so you can follow along. We're on page 1. You know, the result of trauma in our life, we're often left with the aftermath. And you know, trauma doesn't have to be capital T. You know, it doesn't have to be a big thing that happened. In fact, neglect sometimes is that kind of silent trauma. We're not really sure that we're being neglected. I mean, for example, when we're upset and we want to respond and our caregivers don't, you know, acknowledge that we're upset and don't come and help us with that, hey, rather it's, hey, you know, what are you crying about? Hey, just don't cry. Come on, let's grow up, you know. And you're not able to be able to process some of that stuff. That's neglecting our emotional needs sometimes, and sometimes that can really cause us then to have this sense of not being well, that something's wrong, that I have to take care of myself, and I better be careful, I better be watching. And so there's all kinds of traumas. There's things that should have happened, for example, like what we just talked about, that didn't happen. I wasn't soothed. Maybe I wasn't felt significant in the environment I was in. I wasn't safe. You know, I didn't, you know, no one celebrated my life, my birthdays. I mean, those kind of things happen. And then, of course, there's trauma that should have never happened to us that did, right? And we know some of those in the forms of different kinds of abuse. And so there's different traumas that can happen. And frankly, all of us have been children. And as children, we don't always interpret things accurately. And it's that inaccuracy that causes us problems. Because a child, given a choice, will normally blame themselves. Something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me. I didn't do something right, or I better do something right, or they're confused. But very rarely do they blame others for all their problems. Now, as they get older, they'll learn that, and they may accuse them that, but still, there's something wrong with me. It's a felt belief, an embodied belief. It's not so much in words, and it continues with us. And so what happens, it can cause a lot of different emotional issues, intrusive thoughts, anxiety, depression, pervasive, this hypervigilance, right? And of course, physical maladies. When you're going around hypervigilant all the time, it can work in your different illnesses, different kinds of chronic problems that many people suffer with. Well, Lorna Collier, in her article for American Psychological Association, wrote about post-traumatic growth. And in 2016, she says this: post-traumatic growth is a theory that explains this kind of transformation following trauma. She says that it holds that people who endure psychological struggle following adversity can often see positive growth afterwards. And isn't that affirming? Isn't that exciting? Many of us have been through things, but we don't have to stay there. There's a possibility for growth. She says people develop new understanding of themselves, the world they live in, and how to relate to other people, the kind of future that they might have, and a better understanding how to live life. Well, according to another doctor, Dr. Canato, post-traumatic growth refers to what can happen when someone who has difficulty bouncing back experiences a traumatic event that challenges his or her core beliefs, endures psychological struggle, even a mental illness such as post-traumatic stress disorder, and then ultimately finds a sense of personal growth. It is a process that takes, though, a lot of time, energy, and struggle. And that's why this is a year-long class. That's why we take and people come back for a second, even a third year, because it takes time to change some of these things. We get better, right? We're going up. Sometimes then we have a little dip, but but the good news is we're going up. And so we can see growth. People see amazing things happen within months of coming to the class many times. They start understanding things. And then what they don't get the first year, they certainly get the second, and they start putting things together. And that's what helps us develop this post-traumatic stress growth. And I'm excited that we can be doing that. We've been doing this for a long time now, and we have hundreds of people that have just seen amazing things in their life because they stick with it, and they apply it, and they learn it. And what they don't get the first time, they get as we repeat it over and over again. So, someone who is already resilient, the article continues, when trauma occurs, won't experience post-traumatic growth because a resilient person isn't rocked to the core by an event and doesn't have to seek a new belief system, explains Dr. Tedeschi. Less resilient people, on the other hand, may go through distress and confusion as they try to understand this terrible thing happening to them and what it means for their worldview. In their post-traumatic growth inventory, the authors look for positive responses in 5 areas. And here's what they look for. All right, if we're going to see positive growth, if we're going to see growth in our emotional well-being, especially coming out of adversity, or we're reacting to trauma, we're being triggered from things in the past, then we want to see if we can improve in the area of appreciation of life. Are we pessimistic? Well, let's start saying, I wonder if I can be optimistic. I wonder if I can start having gratitude and appreciate life. Other is relationships with others. Have I allowed myself to have poor relational skills? Have I allowed myself to have bad relationships? Well, then I have to own that. I need to own that and work on that. Maybe seek counseling, whatever it takes, but I need to improve relational skills. And then new possibilities in life. Have I felt hampered? Have I learned to be helpless? This learned helplessness? Well, who says? Who says that you're helpless? Maybe it's time to say, I'm not helpless. I'm not a victim to my past anymore. It doesn't define me. I'm going to move forward. And you can seek counseling to help you with that, perhaps a pastor, perhaps some friends, and you can really start changing things and look for new possibilities in life. And then they're looking for personal strength. Personal strength. Do you know what your weaknesses are? If so, are we able to improve on some of them, perhaps? Nudge our way forward? What about our strengths? Are we improving on those and letting our strengths pull us along. We can work on personal strength and then spiritual change. And that's where our attitude, we come, and yes, we lament and we can talk to God about our problems. We can tell him how bad we feel. We can get mad at God. He's not afraid of us. But we can also start to appreciate his deep, deep love for us. And we can start to appreciate the fact that he knows our pain. He knows what we've been through, and he knows that he has a future for us. And we can start to trust him and come back spiritually and start living for him in these areas and trusting him in these areas. So those are 5 things that we can do. And if you don't have these notes, I'd encourage you again to write me at ron@empowerministry.org, and I'll be happy to send them to you. Those 5 things are really worth it. Well, as the literature continues, they also talk about stages to overcoming post-traumatic stress. And it's interesting because post-traumatic growth holds that there are people who endure psychological struggles following adversity can often see positive growth afterwards. And in their program, the authors here, they've developed 3 stages that help people heal. And that's on page 2. So if you want to look at that on page 2. Stage 1 is stabilizing. Okay, I've been through it. I've woken up. It may have been 10 years that you've been living in this stress and anxiety, but now you're awakened to it. You realize it now. You go, aha. I've been going through this. I've been, just continuing to cope, and now I know that there's hope. And I'm not just going to stay in status quo anymore. I realize that I've been in this funk, you might say, with this traumatic stress. And now, I want to pull out of it. I want to pull out of it. And so we're restabilizing. We've committed, it's where a person regains a sense of safety and emotional resilience. I'm out of the cloud now. I can see a little clearer now. It's like a person that's tried to come off of addiction, maybe their 5th, 6th, 7th time. And all of a sudden, this is it. This is the one. And so now you're at a place where, you regain a sense of safety and emotional resilience. It involves, the first 2 parts of our program. That's why we talk about starting to recognize emotions, right? That's what we talked about last week, recognizing emotions. When we're the sensations that are going on. And then we're talking about regulating them. But more than regulating, we're talking about emotionally relearning. We're trying to relearn the things that are causing us the problems in the first place, what we believe that's causing us stress. And the second stage they call is reevaluation, and that may be where you're at now. You've woken up to the fact that, hey, I don't want to stay in this. I'm going to get out, and now I'm reevaluating things. And that's where a person starts to recognize their symptoms and starts to evaluate what could be and contributing to our emotional thinking. And that relates to emotional relearning. We're reevaluating, right? We're starting to understand some of these things, and we're saying, I can pull out of this. I want help. And I'm starting to understand why I'm thinking this way. That's why we take so much time talking about the brain, talking about attachment, talking about trauma. Now we're talking about emotional recognition and regulating, and then we'll talk more about emotional relearning. We want to explain all this so we can have a grasp of it, and we can do stage 2, start to reevaluate, and then stage 3 is relive. And relive. And when I first read this, I thought, that'd be a good 4th stage to our program. I have stage 1, emotional recognition, second one, emotional regulation, and then emotional relearning. If I was going to add a 4th one, it'd be emotional reliving. And that's what they're talking about here. It's where a person lives with a new awareness of who they are, with emotional resilience, and begins to reconnect with others in healthy, attuned ways. That's exactly what we do here. That's exactly what we do, and that's why people come back that 2nd, 3rd year, because they're enjoying it so much, and they're starting these new relationships, and they're growing, and it's exciting. Growth is exciting. It's exciting. These last 15, 20 years of my life have been the most exciting years of my life. I've grown more emotionally and spiritually than I ever believed I could. I've dug into this stuff and learned and continue to learn and continue to grow and continue to work on myself and enjoy the fellowship of others and how they pour into me and I pour into them and how together we emotionally grow. So as we look at our own program here, emotional resilience, we have the three things that I've mentioned: emotional recognition, regulation, and then the relearning. And this relearning, let's go over that. Again, it's on page 2. Let's just spend a few minutes about that. We're going to be talking more and more about it as we go into the second half of the program here. And that is where we stop and realize, that there's memories that have, from childhood, experiences in childhood that have caused us to believe certain things. And they were emotionally learned. They were emotionally learned. Somewhere there was an emotional sense to it. It was someone with authority, someone that said something and either tripped our fear cycle, right? Caused us to be fearful or shamed or something like that. And there was an emotional weight. If someone you don't know comes up and says, you're no good, who do you think you are? You're no good. That might hurt our feelings a little bit, but we don't know them. Even as a child, we don't know them. Now, they may have said it rough and it hurt our feelings and scared us, but we'd probably get over that because they're not in our life. They don't have anything to really do with our life. They're not a threat to us. They were at that moment, but we don't know them. But when you have people in your life, whether it's at school, at church, at home, that are somewhat in authority, and most people are in authority over you when you're a child, right? Neighbors, all kinds of, and they start putting you down. They start saying things about you, and they say it with a weight and a look and an emotion. It becomes emotionally learned. And again, it very rarely is a little child, small child, going to say, well, that's on you. No, it's on them as a child. Now we get older, we learn to do that. The rational part of our brain around 12 years old starts coming online, and so teenagers can get more rebellious in that. But when we're younger, it's confusing. And that's when the amygdala really gets involved and says, okay, a look like that, a look like that guy just gave me, that's dangerous. That means danger is coming. Tone of voice like that means there's some danger coming. And what they said, some of the words also, all these things have meaning. And so if in the future I see someone with that look, with that tone of voice, saying something similar, I'm going to automatically thinking, uh-oh, they're not going to be happy with me. They're going to think that, I'm no good. They're going to think that I'm a piece of garbage or whatever I picked up in that earlier one. And therefore, I better either shape up, please them or do something, or I better, fight, or I better get out of here. And so I react, you see. And that sounds simplistic, but you'll be amazed at what we really actually believe about ourselves sometimes and how it can get tripped up. Now, this program isn't a replacement for psychotherapy. If some of these things that we talk about really start to get to you, then, and you're watching in that, you can step away for a few minutes, get a deep breath, regain your composure. If it bothers you, you don't have to continue watching. We're not here to traumatize you. But let me say this, if you do find that some things are troubling you, then I would recommend that you see a counselor and take the notes. Say, look, we were talking about this, and something really inside happened. And the author said in there that I don't have to continue, but maybe I should see a counselor. And then you go do that, because you're worth it. You're worth it. And when these things happen to us, they're clues that we need maybe some help. And the good news is we can overcome these things. We can get that aha that all of a sudden it starts to make sense. And for some of you, you've had some severe trauma. And I would encourage you to be able to talk with someone that you respect, someone that's professional if you need to really bring out that where you can deal with it and get past it. And so, I say that now because as we talk about emotional relearning, sometimes that's there. And I'm not here to cause anyone to have severe trauma memories. Instead, we want to be able to overcome some of the emotions that happen. But I do encourage you, this isn't a replacement for therapy. If you feel that there's some things happening, let's get the help we need, all right? Let's get the help we need. So, emotional relearning asks that you look at your post-traumatic trauma beliefs so you can break free from false definitions of yourself and exert a new freedom in choosing your future. If you find yourself getting stirred up or feeling uncomfortable, like I said, you can always step out. And you can see that on page 2, okay? And then emotional reliving, that's the 4th step I would add, that we can go on and we can start to live with that fruit of the Spirit in our lives. That when stress comes, we can return to love and joy and peace and patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's amazing to me that God, in His Word, talked about the fruit of the Spirit. And those are resilient terms. Those things right there will cause us to be able to be resilient in almost any and every circumstance. Well, let's look a little more at this now. Where does some of this stuff happen? Where does it come? And we want to talk a little bit more about emotional recognition. It starts in our body. It starts in our body. And it's so hard to calm down when your body is alarmed. And that's where it starts. And if we're going to really improve, then we're going to have to really learn to recognize when it's happening. Then we can regulate it. And when we recognize it, we regulate it, then we can say, okay, what was I believing? And I can start to emotionally relearn. But if we don't learn to recognize it, we'll just continue in our cycle. And the only time we'll think about it is afterwards. It's like the person trying to overcome addiction, and he goes, I can't believe I went out and got plastered again. See, it's hindsight. It'd be better if he could figure out, whoa, hey, when am I being triggered in the first place, where I can do something about that. And so that's what we're talking. Often we go right into the emotion without even paying attention to it. Our body that reacted first causes us to go down a way. We start behaving without even thinking about it. And there's a tremendous experiment that kind of proves some of this. Antonio Damasio, head of neurology at the University of Iowa Carver College in medicine, ran an experiment that talks about how the body knows way before the brain does when things are awry. And see, that's the thing. These are implicit memories. Don't underestimate the amygdala. Don't underestimate our power of knowing when something is happening. And when it's put in there, it's powerful. It's a trigger. And so what they did, they took some students and he gave subjects 4 decks of cards. They were hooked up then to sensors to measure that skin conductance responses, right? Or SCRs, and which is sort of like the lie detectors, right? They get the different waves that happen on the skin there. And when you're thinking in it, so the body registers it. The subjects were asked to flip the cards, picking from any deck. Now, 2 decks were rigged. 2 of the decks were rigged to produce an overall loss in play money, okay? And 2 to produce a gain. At intervals, the participants were asked what they thought was going on in the game. By the time they had turned about 10 cards, subjects began to show some activity on the lie detector, right? On the sensor detector, right? It sensed through the fingernails that something's going on. Something's going on. Now, the person wasn't thinking of that. By the time, it says here, by the time they turned 10 cards, subjects began to show that when they reached for a losing deck. That is, they showed a physical reaction. However, it wasn't until they had turned an average of 50 cards. All right, 10 is when it started showing up in their fingertips. 50 cards, that's 40 cards later, could they start to verbalize their hunch that 2 decks were riskier. Now, they would start to reach for it, their fingers picked it up, and they'd reach for another one, but they didn't know why they were doing it. They weren't conscious of why they were doing it. Their fingers knew, their brain didn't know yet. Do you understand? And so what happened here, it said it took 30 more cards, that's 80 now, 30 more cards before they could explain why their hunch was right. 3 players were never able to put their hunches into words, yet they too showed elevated SCRs, and they too picked the right decks, you see. Even if they couldn't explain it, their bodies knew what was going on. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? That's that part of us, part of our brain that is so intuitive and so in touch with danger, with things that are going wrong, so in touch with the negativity bias that it can tell ahead of time. Now, part of being able to change our emotional state is being aware of when we are in one, when we're in one. You got to remember, it's our normal. It's our normal. And what do we tell people? Oh, it's not that bad, right? It's our normal. Well, many times we're depressed, angry, feeling ashamed, and not even aware that it's happening. It's our normal. It's a learned helplessness. We kind of feel in a funk, but we're not labeling it. We're not trying to pull out of it, right? Nothing is further from the truth, though. Joy, joy is a choice, and we can return to it. We can return to it. We can make a choice to get out of it when we become aware of it. If we become aware of it, of what's happening inside us, we can make choices. And one way is by listening to what I call body talk, right? What's going on in our body? And so it's our body-brain interaction. Now, God has created us in a marvelous way. And we have 3 distinct parts of the brain working together in harmony. Our prefrontal cortex that we talked about, right? The prefrontal cortex, right up in here. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for complex thinking and our social functioning. Our midbrain, right, this limbic area in the middle part of the brain, that emotional part of the brain, storing memories and processing feelings. And then the brainstem, the lower part of the brain, is responsible for our survival, using our regulatory systems such as heart rate, respiration. It's where the fight, and freeze works with the central nervous system. And so the brain forms this body-brain connection. Now, Dr. Peter Levine is done seminal work on the subject, and he writes in his book, Trauma Proofing Your Kids, the following. He says, each region of our brain has very specialized functions, and each speaks its own language. The thinking brain speaks with words, while the emotional brain uses the language of feelings, such as anger, sorrow, joy, disgust, fear. Unlike the newer thinking and feeling brain segments, the lower brain speaks the unfamiliar, but vastly important language of sensation. The language of sensation is to many a foreign language. There's a world of sensation and sensation-based feelings inside you and I that exists whether or not you are aware of it. This is Dr. Levine saying this. Fortunately, it is a language that with a little practice is easy to learn. Now we're on the bottom of 3. He says it's essential to be familiar with sensations when traveling the road to recovery from overwhelming stress, as it is learning basic survival phrases when traveling abroad, right? Because in order to help others, it only makes sense to get acquainted with your own inner landscape first. Because it is the lower brain that ensures our survival and homeostasis, it is wise adult who befriends this deep instinctual layer of consciousness. No computers, equipment, or costs are involved. All that is necessary is time, attention, and intent. Time, attention, and intent. With some quiet, focused time, this specialized language of sensation can be easily mastered. All it takes is unhurried time, set aside without distractions, to pay attention to how your body feels, Remember, because the lower brain does not register words, you cannot learn its language merely by reading about it or listening to this video, right? Sensations must be experienced. Paradoxically, as we become more instinctual like the animals, we also become fully human. Now, the caveat. It sounds easy. Sensations must be experienced. Well, that would be fine if I'm talking to those of us that aren't having emotional issues, right? The reason we're triggered is because a lot of times it's out of fear and shame, and those are horrific emotions. Who wants to be afraid? Who wants to feel shame and just total disregard for themselves? No one. And the trouble is, when we're talking about a child, that danger can be way, way out of proportion. Have you ever seen a little child bleed? They cut their finger and they go, "Oh, I'm bleeding," right? And they're crying like they're going to die. And it's maybe 2 drops of blood. They have no comprehension. Their emotions are elevated. Now, they can calm down, the parent can calm them down, and then they can be off playing again, and that's good. That they can learn resilience. But when that resilience doesn't happen, then what's left in that amygdala is that heightened emotion. And frankly, that's not something we need to necessarily embrace. But guess what? We're not children anymore. Isn't that good? And even though that child in us is going to really, really act up, we can try to take that adult part of ourselves and calm it down. Because here's what happens. One way to emotionally relearn is to be able to get in touch with these emotions. Let it rise, and then let it go, like a wave. When we learn to ride the wave, sooner or later our brain's going to say, well, that wasn't dangerous at all. I mean, it wasn't dangerous. And so as we learn to regulate these things, as we learn to, number one, recognize them, let them stay long enough that we regulate them, we're actually emotionally relearning. And so it's cool. So you see on page 4, I have a little cookie cutter, guys, but I'm asking yourself, where do you sense grief and sadness in your body? Well, it could be the hollowness of the chest, right? And where do you feel fear? It's different with different people, but a lot of times the stomach or held breath or the eyes are wide open or it's up here in the chest, like, this tension. Where do you feel anger? It could be the neck, the shoulders, jaw, flush face, right? Clenched hands. Where do you feel shame? It could be that slumped shoulders, that hollow in the upper body or in the head, just kind of, And where do you feel disgust? Well, it could be in the face, right? Tightness in the neck or the stomach. And so we feel these things. And we need to start knowing and being able to recognize some of these sensations that are going on. And one way to do that is to be in the present. Be in the present. In order to recognize our sensations, we have to be in the present. It's a felt emotion. It's not a remembrance so much as it's a felt, embodied belief. And we need to catch it when it happens in our body. Have you ever been to a big mall that you've never been to before and you're looking for a certain store? And so what do? You walk in one of the entrances because they got multiple entrances. You walk in the entrance, you're parked out there somewhere, you're not even sure what direction it is because the mall is all different kinds of shape, and you're walking in and there's the kiosk. And you look up the store, and there it is, and you go, oh, there's the store, great. But now what? How are you going to get there? See, you can only get there if you know where you are. And so what do you look for? That little dot that says, you are here. I don't know who thought of that, but it was great, right? You are here. Now that I know I'm here and the store is there, I can figure out how to get there. And the trouble is, we're not, when it comes to healing ourselves, when it comes to emotionally relearning, when it comes to having victory over some of these emotions, we need to know where we are. Because if we don't know where we are, we can't get in touch with what happened in the past or how to regulate it for the future. Instead, we're always in hindsight. And so we need to figure out, where am I? We need to be in the present. We need to be aware of this particular moment. Now, our mind gets so distracted. And if we're in a hypervigilant state, right, it was like there was a predator in the room. And so I'm always thinking and anticipating. And I'm in the moment, but I'm in a fearful moment, not in the moment inside regulating and knowing who I am. I was in a hypervigilant state, worried about the future. And we're protecting ourselves, and we're stressing out our bodies, and we have all this tension, but we're too consumed to notice what's going on. And so when our body talks, when we have this tension, when we're feeling these things, when I'm hypervigilant, looking around, I need to catch myself. I need to catch myself. And I need to start asking myself, okay, whoa, what's going on? What am I feeling? What am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling tense. I'm feeling, uptight. I'm thinking, okay, what emotion is that? What emotion am I feeling? Well, maybe it's anger or sadness or fear or maybe shame, depression. And so I'm finding it out. And then I can ask myself, what am I believing? What am I believing about myself? And I've written down 7 questions you can ask yourself, and I'll give it to you, send it to you free. You can write me, Ron, at empowerministry.org, and ask for 7 questions, and I'll send you that. And it has in there, on a page and a half, just a short little brief thing of how you can ask these questions, how you can start getting in touch with what's going on. And so, this overreaction, is going on, and you can ask yourself, okay, the final, when have I felt this way before? And now you're going to get somewhere, because there's like a fingerprint to some of these things. And what I'm really reacting to, I've been triggered here, is something my amygdala has memorized from the past. And sometimes when I stop and try to get in touch with, when have I felt this way before, you'll be amazed how I can go back to a memory. And now in that younger memory, I can ask myself, okay, what's going on there? And I can be an observer in that memory, and I can go back in that memory and say, well, Dad said this, okay, well, what's that mean? What did I feel like? Well, I felt like, okay, well, what's the truth? As an adult now, and I'm looking at that, what's the truth? Well, the truth may be that my dad was having a bad day, or he was acting, ridiculous. And if I was to witness this as an adult, and I'd tell my dad, hey, what are you doing? What's going on here? Why'd you do that? And what would I tell to my younger self? I'd say, hey, listen, it's not your fault. You're okay. Dad was just having a rough time. You're not stupid. I would be able to comfort that. And see, that's the thing. We need to emotionally relearn. We need to be able to catch some of those things, remember some of those things where we can correct them. And who better than you? Who better than you to go comfort yourself? And what about asking God? God knows you. He knows the situation. He knows the past, the present, and the future. And you can talk to Him. Lord, this is what I'm believing about myself. What's the truth? And you'll be surprised how He loves to tell you the truth about yourself, how loved you are, how significant you are, how safe you can be with Him. And those things can really make a difference. They can really make a difference. And so you can read that section on page 5 and kind of start grasping it a little bit, because we'll be going into it more and more. Now, Dr. Levine wanted to show how we can often have multiple emotions in one episode. And he calls this pendulation, right? You're like a pendulum. You're going back and forth, different emotions. And so go ahead and relax. Just relax now, and let me tell you this story. And I want you to visualize now in your own brain what you would be thinking, okay? And this is a story Dr. Peter Levine wrote. He says, imagine it's your birthday, and for whatever reason, you're alone. All right, now circumstances have not allowed you to have any planned activities, so you decide you're going to go to a movie. You look for your wallet, but it's not there. You've checked everywhere to find out where your wallet. Now, what are you sensing? As you're closing your eyes and you're listening to this and you're visualizing yourself, what are you sensing right now? You can't find your wallet. What are you sensing? So now you begin to look around the house. You went outside, you looked in your car, you called a few stores, and your wallet isn't anywhere. What emotions now are going through your head? How are you feeling it in your body? Just picture that now. Close your eyes, picture that. Its intensity is one up, hasn't it? Where are you feeling it? I mean, it's your wallet, all your IDs and their credit cards, right? So you're about to give up. You're about to give up and the phone rings. And you pick it up. It's your friend. And she says she has your wallet at her house. You have your wallet at her house. What do you feel now? Okay? What do you feel now? Right? You feel a little more relief. You feel a little bit. She asks if you want to come and pick it up, and you say yes. But she says you have to hurry because I have to leave for the rest of the day. I just found it. So if you need it, please come now. If you don't make it here in a few minutes, I'll have to leave. Now what are you feeling? Now what are you feeling? I mean, there's enough time. She's only a few minutes away, but how are you feeling now? Right? Isn't this interesting how many different emotions we can feel? So you arrive and you knock on the door. There's no answer. The house seems dark. You thought you made it in time. How do you feel now? I love this, huh? I can just imagine. Oh, man. There goes the movie, right? So all of a sudden, though, you hear someone call. The sound's muffled coming from the back of the house. She says, I'm in the back room. Come on in. Now how do you feel? Get that pendulation, right? It's pendulums swinging from side to side. Well, you walk in, it's dark. You can see a light from underneath the back door, and as you approach the room and open the door, all of a sudden you hear a loud, happy birthday! And you realize it's a surprise birthday party for you. What do you feel now? Isn't that amazing? Now, you could have went through that whole episode, and here's the significant point. You could have went through all that and not paid attention to any of those emotions and just reacted to react. Oh, they're there. I mean, you know they're there, but you're not paying attention to it. You're just reacting. And the chances are you'd be stressed, you'd be irritated, you'd be doing all, because most of these things were stressful, weren't they? But as we can reflect, as we can be more reflective than reactive, we can start to get in touch with some of these. Now, most examples, we don't need to go through 10 different emotions, right? We just need the one. Why am I so upset right now? What's going on? You see? But isn't it amazing in that example that I did, you were able to sense, weren't you? You were able to visualize what you would probably be thinking and feeling because you know yourself well. And that's what we're doing. We want to start becoming our own observer, our own detective. And we want to start becoming our own observer, okay? And you can see on the bottom of 6, a lot of different words for sensations. And we need to start increasing our sensation vocabulary, where we can start to distinguish some of these and we can start paying attention to them. And then we need to ask ourselves on page 7, is it the inner child or is this an adult reacting? Am I reacting as a mature adult or am I reacting immaturely? And if I'm reacting immaturely, then the chances are it's this inner child, this unresolved trauma or belief from the past that's really triggering us. I mean, have you ever watched 2 grown men fight out there? I mean, they're like 8th graders, right? Pushing each other, shoving. I mean, it's immature. And so we need then to get in touch with that. As an adult or like a child, which one are we reacting like? And the reaction makes a big difference. A mature adult that's reprimanded at work would probably take it in stride, right? Learn from it, not be happy about it, but would learn about it, improve their behavior. They would not go on worried all day about it. Hey, I made a mistake. I'm not a mistake. Oh, I did something wrong, and I said, hey, I'm sorry. I corrected it, and I learned from it. And you move on. But, how about a person who was rejected for bad behavior, didn't have that had conditional love, not unconditional love. Maybe you were severely reprimanded or overly strict, consequences to things. And they became, really stressed out. How would they feel? Well, chances are they'd be wondering, oh boy, what's going to happen? What's wrong? Why did I do that, right? Tension would mount, all sorts of physical issues would maybe come. Maybe their stomach would get upset, body aches, they'd get a headache perhaps. Why? Because that child in them is triggered, there's some unresolved, and they're actually reacting to things that happened in the past that were unresolved, and now this is a dangerous situation. A person who has power over me, that is the ability to fire me or deal with my livelihood, is not happy with me, and something's wrong with me, and guess what? They figured it out. I've been caught. That's why we put masks on, right? But I've been caught. And now this panic comes in. And I'm upset, and I'm ruminating, and I'm thinking, and maybe I'm fuming, and, And so that should give us a cue, and we should be able in that situation to say, okay, whoa, what's going on here? Whoa, why am I reacting this way? I am really upset about this. I'm thinking, what's going on? And I need to regulate, start breathing, calming down. Start to regulate myself, calm down. Okay, what's going on here? I'm not going to die. I love that phrase. I'm not going to die here. Let's calm down. I'm not going to die. Let's get in touch with this. What's going on? Okay, and how can I be more mature in this situation? And so I can start to deal with it maturely, and then I can start to evaluate, okay, why was I so immature? What was going on? And that's when we can start to get in touch with that, right? And so we want to be able to focus in on our body, and on the bottom of 7, or actually in the middle of 7, it's called body sensations. I have some more different kinds of body sensations you can look at and start building your repertoire, right? And then I talk about zooming out and zooming in. And zooming out is more of a broader look, right? You're focusing on your whole body. You're going from, here, you're kind of doing a body scan. What's going on in my body? What's going on? I feel tense. I feel uptight. I feel like this, right? And I can tell that I'm upset. I feel sick, I want to just get out of here. But then you can zoom in a little bit and say, well, my chest is really, I'm all tight up in the chest. I'm flush in the face. I'm really worried. My breathing shallow. I'm anxious here. I'm afraid something's really wrong. And now we're zooming in a little bit. And so we can start to zoom in, zoom out, and start checking on what's going on in our body, right? And so we can, get in there, and when we zoom in, we can focus on something and start being curious about it. What's it feel like? What's its shape? How much area is it taking up? Is it an intense pain, or is it a kind of a tightness around the whole chest? Is it a tingling? Is it a tightness? And we start to learn. Now, you can do this you can go back to a time when you were emotional and be your own observer and think about it and let your body kind of react to it, because you can shut it off anytime, right? And start to sense, what did that feel like? And the good news, if you're doing that, you can let it elevate and then take a deep breath and let it calm down. And now you're doing two things. You're learning what it felt like. You're learning how to, be sense it next time, where you can recognize it, but you're also learning to regulate it. You're learning to regulate it. And you want to become your own regulator. You can do this. I've done it in the past with panic attacks where I've gone, oh, I'm having a panic attack. I can feel it. And I know it. I know I'm not going to die. I know there's no logical reason here. I know there's no logical reason. This is just faulty wiring. I'm not even going to worry about it. And I just let it come up and go down. And it's over. And I've learned to trust that. But that's a far cry from where I was when it first started happening. But that's where we can get to, you see. That's where we can get to. And it's called emotional regulation. And we start to learn, and we're relearning as we do it, right? And so let's go to the bottom of page 8 here. Somatic experiencing program for healing memory. Trauma causes sensations in the body. And if the trauma is unresolved, we keep a memory of the sensations. Later, when something comes up that reminds us of the trauma, our body reacts. That's what I've been saying. Our natural reaction is to be alarmed. Instead, we want to embrace these sensations and let them run their course. We want to let our body finish in response to the original trauma so we can move on. And here again, Dr. Peter Levine, the father of somatic, that's body, trauma, healing, has written many books on this. He talks about how we can deal with it. And below on page 9 here is a summary of how Dr. Levine suggests that we get in touch with our traumatic body sensations, okay? This is worth the whole hour we're spending together. If you don't have the notes, write me, Ron@Empower Ministry, where I can get these to you, and you can do it. And you know what? If you know other people that are hurting this way, if you know other people that are emotionally reacting a lot of times like this, then call them up. Tell them to watch the video. It's here on Moraine Valley's YouTube page. And by the way, I want to say thanks to, I haven't said that yet, to Moraine Valley Church for letting us use this wonderful facility. Normally we have 60 to 100 people in here. And I'm hoping that, by the time all this blows over in the fall, we're going to start fresh again. We're going to open up the doors. By then, everything should be way behind us, and we can start the class again live, and that's going to be so much fun. Meanwhile, I may do a seminar in here, a couple 10-week seminar maybe on trauma that I'd like to invite people to come to, where we can kind of get ready for the class. So I'll let you know more about that, okay, as we go along. But let's look now, page 9, at some of the things that he says, okay? And we'll be done in just a few minutes. 1, he says, relax, get mentally prepared. Get mentally prepared. In order to embrace our trauma response, we need to get ourselves ready. Relax and mentally prepare to experience your sensations. The goal here, he says, is to become aware of what our body is doing and to safely experience them. Relax and see yourself learning from this new body consciousness. Second is explore and become aware. So mentally prepare, now explore and become aware. From this sense of safety, begin to explore and accept your sensations. This is done a little at a time. First, we become aware of the sensation without deep experience or exploration. Just become conscious of it and then return to our normal consciousness. Okay, so it's just a little bit and then back and forth, right? Systematic desensitization, right? 3, learn to feel safe and stay with your next sensation. After you become conscious of sensations and feel safe to move on, decide to stay with the next time, the next sensation you feel. It may be alarming at first because you have not paid attention to your body, but let yourself experience it. Feel it. Come and then go. Come and go. Come and go like a wave lifting you up and then going past you on the shore, dissipating into the shore. I've done that out in San Diego, man. Get out there and you're waiting for the right wave and you decide this isn't in. It lifts you up, it brings you down, and you turn and you look and the wave, it just dissipates into the shore. And that's what we want to do like this. Come and go like a wave. We're riding the emotions. Stay with these sensations just momentarily long enough to get the sense of rhythm of this contraction, expansion, right? This up and down, okay? And then do it in baby steps. Number 4, experience one small amount of a sensation at a time. This will create an increase in stability, resilience, and reorganization of the nervous system. Isn't this exciting? Huh? We're relearning. This is part of emotional relearning, as well as emotional regulation and recognizing. We're putting them all together here. 5, begin to feel empowered. Let me say that again. Begin to feel empowered. And Dr. Levine uses the example of quietly coming up behind a pigeon, holding it around its wings so it can't move. And when you turn it over, it goes into complete immobility. The possum kind of playing possum, right? But then if you leave for a moment, it corrects itself up and off it goes. You can see that in impala. Gets out there in the field and a lion comes and grabs it and shakes it, right, and puts it down and it plays dead. Well, then the lion leaves to get the cubs because they're going to have dinner. Well, in a few minutes, it gets up, and what's it do? It goes right back to what it was doing. It was running, and you'll see it. It will run in its place for a minute and dissipate all this energy, and it goes back to homeostasis, and then it takes off. So it gets rid of all that pent up, all that charge, charges it off, and then goes. And see, animals don't keep that stress in their bodies. And in a way, that's what we want to kind of do here. We want to feel this empowerment, right? He believes that our goal should be to re-experience our trauma without frightening ourselves and going into a sort of immobility. We don't want to do that. He says, experience the sensation and let yourself gradually, peacefully come out of it feeling empowered. And we do this by following 3 steps, all right? And it's right here on the bottom of 9. A, make note of listening to your body and staying with it compared to the passive response of stuffing sensations down or ignoring them. B, next, we want to uncouple the fear from the immobility. Freeze is just that, a momentarily freeze. It doesn't have to frighten us. We need to uncouple the fear from the freeze. We do this by experiencing the arousal and let it return to homeostasis, balance, and social engagement. This allows us to come out of the immobility back to life. And then C, once we have come this far, we are ready to discharge, right, and regulate high arousal states, redistributing the mass of the vital energy mobilized for life preservation action and supporting higher level brain functions. You can feel that sensation rise in your body, and as you separate the fear from the sensation, right, feel the sensation leave and giving its energy back to your body. It's leaving, and now you're getting that energy back. Feel yourself relax and able to think. And that's riding the wave. It's what I call emotional surfing. And we can learn to do this. And you know what? I was a phobic child. I had a lot of phobias. And I still have some lingering things. And I've had to learn to do this myself. And I have had to practice it myself. And it works. It works. Number 6 here on page 10. As we practice this recognition, acceptance of our body sensations, we will become better at engaging self-regulation to restore dynamic equilibrium and relaxed alertness. So we'll go from a high level of arousal, but dynamically return to a balanced equilibrium. And 7, finally, the goal is to reorient ourselves in the here and now, make contact with the environment, whatever it is, and reestablish the capacity for social engagement. And then I write this paragraph on this: you are not going to die. That's my battle cry. My own experience with panic attacks worked this way. I soon learned that they were only sensations and accepted them as sensations and was able to tame them. I knew that they were false alarms, so I separated out any cognitive message of doom and rode the wave of emotion. I was able to experience them dissipate quickly. And it's about anxiety. Perhaps your troubling emotion is anger, sorrow, disgust, depression, or something else. Whatever it is, it becomes exaggerated when triggered. It is the result of the overwhelming belief that there's an impending doom. The fact is, you're not going to die. Tell your emotion that. Tell yourself that, and proceed to return to joy and peace and deactivate the strong emotion. And then he ends up here. He says, once your body learns that what goes up, charge, excitation, fear, and all that can come down, you are on your way to a more resilient nervous system, one that can weather the ups and downs of life. You will become more like the tall bamboo or the wispy willow that bends, sometimes to the ground, but does not break, even during a monsoon. When your body gets it, you become contagious in a good way. You really start to get it, and you start to sense it, and you can improve on it. Now, you know, the Bible talks about that. The Bible talks about the fact that we get emotionally upset and we feel it in our body. And so I have a prayer here at the back of page 11. I want to read it, and let's close with this prayer. Dear Father, help me tune into my body so I can sense what's going on in me. I ask that you make me more and more aware of my true emotions so I can bring them to you and regulate them. Help me to continually return to your love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thanks for joining me in this session. I have a book here called Power Up. And in here I have a lot of Bible affirmations on different things, self-control over addictions here, strength, depression, discouragement. And you can take these and you'll feel yourself just calming down as you read these affirmations that I've put, the Bible scriptures that I put in the first person. In the beginning part here of the book, I talk about riding the wave. I talk about breathing and relaxing through it. I talk about the different emotional resilience and the steps of emotional resilience. It's a great book. I'll give it to you in a PDF form. If you write me, you can go www.empowerforliving.com/power. Let me say that again. www.empowerforliving.com/power. And you can have that absolutely free, okay? You can look for some of our videos. I'm Mr. Change Agents, what I call myself, on YouTube and in Facebook. I have a Mr. Change Agent YouTube page as well as Facebook page. So you can go there and find some of the other things we have. You can look up Ronald Ovett on Amazon. We have a new book on anxiety that's coming out right now. So you can be looking at that. It's an exciting meditational series on anxiety. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.